So the cure for the coronavirus is a riot? Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Neither does anything else on the surface. And what I'm going to show you today is that a bunch of deep state billionaires, including some who have been the leading financiers of racial quackery, Nazi racial eugenics pseudoscience, are also funding the supposedly anti racist protesters out there burning our cities down. If it sounds like a clown world, that's because it is, except the clowns aren't funny. Stay tuned for this episode of Behind the Deep State. So one day they were telling us that it was like practically murder to go out of our houses for non-essential reasons, and the next day you're suddenly a vile, nasty, racist white supremacist if you don't go out of your house and go congregate by the thousands and burn down your cities to protest alleged racism. Obviously something doesn't add up here, right? Something is really, really fishy. So what is going on? Well, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek at what's going on behind the scenes because it is orchestrated. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how the deep state was using communist tactics, pressure from above, pressure from below. We're going to dig a little bit deeper today. We're going to name some names. I'm going to show you who is involved and what they are doing. Of course, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that George Floyd got killed, and supposedly that inspired all of these riots, right? It exposed systemic racism and police brutality. And so now to prove that Black lives actually matter, we need to go out and burn down our cities. Well, obviously that's not true. If Black lives really mattered to these people, there'd be protests out in the streets about David Dorn, a black police officer who was murdered by a bunch of thugs trying to protect his own community from rioters and looters. They might also be concerned about the thousands of innocent black children who are murdered every single day in this country with taxpayer money through the abortion mills. But those Black lives don't matter. Okay, only certain Black lives matter, Black lives that further the narrative that they're trying to push. And so what's going on? I want to break down some of the groups that are behind all this chaos and then show you what's really happening behind the scenes. So obviously the most important one is Black Lives Matter, at least on the surface of things. And so I want to dig in a little bit to their background. It was founded in large part to glorify a cop-killing communist terrorist named Assata Shakur, who murdered a New Jersey state trooper and then was convicted of killing the cop and then fled to communist Cuba after being broken out of jail by her buddies at the Weather Underground, Obama's favorite terrorist group. Now, we'll talk about where the money for this comes from momentarily. We also have another very, very important group is, of course, Antifa, right? Antifa, the terrorist organization, also funded by the same people. Very weird, and we'll get into some of the funding. Now, Antifa is just openly communist, right? They don't even bother hiding. Neither does Black Lives Matter. I mean, when Fidel Castro, El Comandante, died, they actually put out this eulogy saying how sorry they were that Castro had died, that he was, here, I got some quotes here. The BLM felt an overwhelming sense of loss when El Comandante died. They said, it's the lessons we take from Fidel. From Fidel, we know that revolution is sparked by an idea, right? Never mind the fact that Fidel's chief executioner, Ernesto Che Guevara, was a racist mass murderer who slaughtered huge numbers of black people. Interesting to note also is that Black Lives Matter has a lot of friends internationally. Just very recently, the Nelson Mandela Foundation put out a statement where they called on Black Lives Matter to use violence to advance their goals. Here's some direct quotes. They said the BLM should use violence as a means to, quote, fundamentally restructure our societies. As we have seen in South Africa during the democratic era, violent protest is often the result of a careful calculation by communities who have come to see that only such action elicits the desired response from the state. Then they continue, and I quote, the use of violence can be rational and carefully targeted as part of a strategy to counter structural and other forms of violence against Black lives. And of course, it always ought to be so. Okay, now keep in mind where this is coming from, the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Now, Nelson Mandela has been turned into kind of a cult hero by the fake media, by the same people funding the riots in our streets. But if you know his background, you know there's much more to the story that we're not being told. Go watch our episode on South Africa where we really, really get into that. It's actually, I think, one of our most popular episodes. I think it's got 67,000 views just on YouTube so far, combined with all the other platforms, probably well over 100,000 now. But just to give you some hint, Nelson Mandela's wife, she was a real firm believer in using violence. She was actually caught on camera promoting what's called necklacing to liberate South Africa. Now, for those of you who don't remember the what happened in South Africa, necklacing was when they would put a tire filled with gasoline around the neck of one of their victims and then light it on fire. Mostly, they did this to fellow black Africans that didn't support their little revolution. And many black people groups in South Africa and many black individuals in South Africa were opposed to the communist revolution. The Zulu Nation, for example, was very much opposed to this. They created the Inkatha Freedom Party. So this is the kind of violence they're talking about, right? A strategic way of bringing down what they see as oppression, right? So other organizations involved, we talked about Antifa, which claims to be an anti-fascist organization, but they actually will tell you that really they are a communist organization. You have the City University of New York law professor, a guy called Mike Isaacson, a self-proclaimed Antifa leader. He says basically anti-communism is code for fascism, right? So if you don't want to live under a totalitarian mass murdering dictatorship, you are a fascist by definition. Okay. He said on Twitter, "We ought to off the pigs." That was on August 29th of 2017. And of course, Antifa now has created their autonomous zone in Seattle, the 6 city blocks that they have taken control over. Another close ally of Antifa is the Democratic Socialists of America. Very powerful organization in the United States. They say they have something like 60,000 members, mostly young activists across America, all of them ready for revolution. And, they say, oh, well, we don't like the totalitarian mass murderers of the 20th century, but man, we really love Nicolas Maduro, right? The mass murdering dictator of Venezuela. So very interesting. And then another one of the organizations that's involved in this is one of the crucial ones. It's called the Sunrise Movement. And Millennial Millie, who's a wonderful reporter, she actually managed to obtain some of the video of these organizations from before the rioting, before all of that actually started. And I want to show you a couple of clips. They say they're building an army of young people. They've been planning for a long time this defund the police campaign. They say that the fight against climate change exists alongside the fight against white supremacy and colonialism. We need a Green New Deal. Now, check out this clip here from one of their leaders. Her name is Sarah Abbott. And listen to what she says.
Uprisings, including actions like burning buildings, are legitimate and powerful forms of resistance.
All right, so communist revolutionaries, they want to burn down our buildings as a form of resistance. Violence is a legitimate tool. We've got another organizer. Her name is Ashley Green. She's a lesbian. Check out this. Listen to this clip.
So last night, when that police station went up in flames, me and my girlfriend, we poured shots. We were happy.
And then also, we have witches and Satanists openly participating, right? Mashable did an interesting report where they talked about how witches for BLM, these witches were going to the protests and casting spells on the police and asking their demon gods for protection over the rioters and the protesters. And I want to show you this clip, too, of an evangelist who went into the autonomous zone in Seattle and was threatened with death and was, violently sexually assaulted by a mob of homosexuals. Listen to this.
This is a very forceful hug.
What does it feel like to get hugged by a homosexual?
Glory to the King.
I'll kiss you on the face, buddy.
Glory to the King eternal. Oh, King I am a free citizen! But also the autonomous zone. I am a free citizen in the autonomous zone!
So those are just some of the organizations that are involved, some of the people that are involved. I mean, obviously very anti-Christian, openly communist. Right? I mean, you can see them carrying communist banners everywhere. But one of the things that I think is so interesting is the fact that these are all being funded by super capitalists. So obviously George Soros is the big one, and we talked about him a couple weeks ago, right? We know he's been funding Black Lives Matter, poured millions of dollars, many millions of dollars into Black Lives Matter. We talked about hacked documents that showed that they were planning actually to create this national movement, that they wanted to accelerate the dismantling of structural inequality generated and maintained by local law enforcement. We know that they actually, this is a direct quote from a Soros report, they spent $650,000 to, quote, invest in technical assistance and support for the groups at the core of the burgeoning Black Lives Matter movement. That's straight out of a George Soros report that we've talked about. Unbelievable, the stuff that's going on here. Now, we talked also a little bit about how Soros was funded by even wealthier super capitalists. Of course, we're talking about the Rothschild dynasty. Um, that was actually covered by the Washington Times, which was interesting. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the Rockefellers too, and we still haven't done episodes on the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds yet. Those are coming. I know we've been talking about it for a while. They will come eventually because these are very, very important players in the deep state. But the Rockefellers, they've been huge in this for a long time, and it turns out Insider Philanthropy did a very interesting investigation, and what they found out was that the Rockefeller Family Foundation is the primary financial backer of this Sunrise movement that's demanding divestment from oil, that's organizing these riots, these protests, these defund the police. So again, we have super capitalists funding communists, right? What in the world is going on? We know that Soros and the Rockefellers both have openly praised the communist Chinese.
To bring China into the creation of a new world order.
So back in the 1920s, the Rockefellers and all their various foundations were openly funding eugenics. They were funding, for example, even Joseph Mengele, the Nazi quote-unquote doctor who was doing experiments on little children at Auschwitz. Historian Edwin Black, the author of several books on eugenics, Nazis, and the Holocaust, talked about this in articles and in his books. He says that by 1926, many, many millions of dollars in today's dollars had been given by the Rockefellers to these Nazi racial scientists. And so, on the surface of things, it doesn't make any sense. Why would these super capitalists be funding these super communists? It's very, very bizarre. Well, if you've been following this series, if you've been studying the deep state, you already know what's going on here, right? You guys met some episodes ago. We talked about Carroll Quigley and this book right behind me here, Tragedy and Hope, where he actually revealed what was going on here. So I want to show you just a quick clip of Bill Clinton. The only person Bill Clinton mentioned and thanked as his mentor during his DNC acceptance speech was this guy, Carroll Quigley. So check this out real quick.
And then, as a student at Georgetown, I heard that call clarified by a professor named Carroll Quigley.
He heard that call clarified by Carroll Quigley. Well, Carroll Quigley was an insider's insider. He was a professor at Georgetown University, and he actually was very, very close to the deep state, and he talks about that in this book. He says he was, involved with them for decades. He actually was permitted to examine their papers for a period of 2 years, and in his book, he actually exposes everything that's going on. Now, I want to show you this quote because he actually explains exactly what we're seeing in the streets right now. He says, and I quote, "There does exist and has existed for a generation an international Anglophile network which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the roundtable groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups and frequently does so." Okay? Listen to that again. Not only does the deep state not have any aversion to cooperating with communists, it frequently does so, okay? There you go, folks. And of course, this is not news to people who've been studying this for a long time. A Stanford historian, Anthony Sutton, actually blew the whistle on all this in his phenomenal book. I've got that right behind me, called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, where he shows that the Bolshevik Revolution that enslaved Russia under communism was actually funded by Wall Street financiers and mega bankers. So that's what's going on here, folks. And if you want to know what the end goal is, Quigley actually revealed it in his book. He said the goal was to create a global governing system where these elites would end up in complete control of the banking system through the central banks and of the governments of every single country. And he agreed with all this, right? He said in the book, this is a direct quote, "I have no aversion to it, the deep state, or most of its aims." He said his chief difference of opinion, I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known. Now, another interesting and ironic thing is that one of the key founders of this deep state network, these roundtable groups that Quigley talks about in his book, was, of course, Lord Cecil Rhodes, the Rothschild-backed mega capitalist of South Africa, who kind of tried to monopolize the mining sector down there. And this guy was an open, virulent racist. He said the English were a superior race, is a direct quote, and he thought they should rule the world. That's why he set up these roundtable groups. And so now you have their descendants, the Council on Foreign Relations and others, openly bankrolling supposed anti-racism protesters. Why? Not because they care about racism. In fact, the guys who founded all this were a bunch of racist whack jobs, right? The reason they're doing it is because the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. They think this is going to help move forward their new world order.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build.
Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era.
So the New World Order, that's their goal, folks. They're very, very clear about it. George Soros, the guy who's funding these riots in the streets, he already told us China ought to own the New World Order. You already saw the clip, right? That's what we're going toward, guys. And they've been on this for a long time, right? We did a whole episode on the foundations. Go back and watch it. Congress investigated these foundations back in the 1950s. And what they found, in 1952, they put together the Select Committee to investigate tax-exempt foundations and other similar organizations. And what they found in their final report was that these big foundations, all of them funded by super capitalists, Rockefellers, Carnegies, Ford, and on, that they were actually funding, and I quote, subversion is the term they used. They were trying to replace America's constitutional system of government with what they described in the final report as oligarchical collectivism. He explained that one of their chief tools was the education system. And just so you're clear about what the agenda is, guys, right? Just so there's no murkiness around this. I want to show you just one little quick clip from Norman Dodd. And if you haven't watched this whole interview, you really should. But Norman Dodd was the chief investigator of the Select Committee that Congress created to investigate these tax-exempt foundations. And what he said was he was actually asked by the head of the Ford Foundation to come on over to his office in New York. And he was sat down, and the head of the Ford Foundation explained to him, hey, do you want me to tell you what we're doing? I mean, you don't have to do all this investigating. I'll just tell you what we're doing. And according to Norman Dodd, this is what the head of the Ford Foundation, Alan Geither, told him. Listen to this.
Mr. Gaither said, Mr. Dodd, we've asked you to come up here today because we thought that possibly off the record you would tell us why the Congress is interested in the activities of foundations such as ourselves. And before I could think of how I would reply to that statement, Mr. Gaither then went on voluntarily and stated, he said, Mr. Dodd, all of us that have a hand in the making of policies here have had experience either with the OSS during the war or the European Economic Administration after the war. We've had experience operating under directives, and these directives emanate and did emanate from the White House. Now we still operate under just such directives. Would you like to know what the substance of these directives is? And I said, yes, Mr. Gaither, I'd like very much to know. Whereupon he made this statement to me, namely, Mr. Dodd, we here operate on in response to similar directives, the substance of which is that we shall use our grant-making power so to alter life in the United States that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union.
All right, guys, there you have it. They are working to so alter life in the United States that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. They can have their little one world order that they've been dreaming of forever. I'll tell you the Rockefeller clip one more time. We've gone over it probably 3 or 4 times in this series so far. But, go to page 405 of Rockefeller's memoirs. He's very, very clear about what is going on. He says he's an internationalist, that he's conspiring, is the word he uses, with a secret cabal against the best interests of his own country, that would be America, to form a one-world political and economic order, a one-world order, if you will. So that's where this is all going, folks. There is no, dichotomy between super capitalists funding super communists. They all, I mean, the useful idiots burning down our cities, they don't understand this stuff, right? I mean, they were brainwashed in government school. Go back and watch those episodes. They have no idea that they're being used as pawns in an evil, evil agenda. A lot of them think they're doing good, right? They think they're fighting racism. They think they're fighting police brutality. They've been watching too much fake news. They sat there for 12 years being indoctrinated in a public school. They don't know any better. Folks, it's up to you to reach these kids before they burn down our whole country. Now, the one thing that these people can't tolerate is exposure. And so you're thinking, all right, Alex, you got me concerned. Now I don't know what, I'm worried. What do I do? Don't be worried. Just take action. You can start off by educating yourself on these things and educating other people. And if you don't feel like talking to people about it, send them this video. Email it to your friends. Email it to your pastor. This is crucial stuff, guys. Don't get sucked into the lies. Don't get sucked into the false narratives. Don't be a useful idiot. Don't be a pawn. And remember what Sun Tzu, the military strategist, the ancient Chinese military strategist, said, right? If you don't know yourself or your enemy, you're going to lose every single battle. And that's where we are right now as Americans, right? We don't know our own history. We've been brainwashed in the schools to think that America is this racist, horrible place. We don't know the enemy, right? Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but very, very few people understand what I just showed you in this video, what I just proved to you in this video. So guys, if we want to defeat these people, we've got to pray, and we've got to understand that unless our fellow Americans are educated on what is going on, the other side will succeed. Our liberty will be crushed, our civilization will be crushed, and it won't be recovered in our lifetime, guys. So like this video, share it, subscribe, put it on other platforms, email it to your cousin, send it to your mom, whatever you got to do, get the word out. Thanks again for watching. I'm Alex Newman. This is Behind the Deep State, and God bless you all.